He's a uniter, not a divider. His name is Donald Trump. I'm Scott Ott with Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, and this episode of Right Angle is brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. Gentlemen, there's an op-ed in the New York Times, by Kristen Soltis Anderson, who's a GOP pollster, about a phenomenon that she's seeing that's a real sea change in the way people think and the way they vote and what they tell to pollsters, a real shift underway that is uniting the country around what we distrust. And Stephen Green, it's fascinating. She throws out a couple of statistics in this New York Times column. 89% of American counties shifted rightward in the last election. The voting gap between men and women shrank by 3%. Voters under 30 and voters over 65, who in the last election were split by 30 points, are now just 12 points apart. And non-white voters shifted more than 12 points toward Trump. And what we're seeing, she says, is I'm going to quote her here, a new bipartisan alignment on skepticism about organizations, institutions, and professions, including business, by the way, which has lost confidence among Republicans. Trust in the military. The military as an institution used to be really big in the Republican Party, losing points, massive points with Republicans right now. And Democrats are losing faith in the media, which they used to be hugely supportive of. And so their support of the media is dropping. And essentially what we're seeing is these two groups coming together because they no longer trust some of the fundamental institutions in our society. Academia, as you well know, back in 2014, believe it or not, about 50% of Republicans believed in the U.S. Higher education institutions. Now it's down to 20%, and Democrats are losing faith in them as well, just at a slower pace. Steve, is it possible that we finally found something that we can all come together around, and that is the fact that we can't trust any of the institutions or individuals who've been telling us for years, trust us?
Yeah, it feels a lot like the 70s. I was a little kid in the 70s. I was born in 69. But I was just old enough, especially as Carter's first term was mercifully wrapping up, only term, that the 70s were pretty ugly and awful. You can really see it in the popular culture of the time. Movies involved, conspiracy theories. I think when I was 9 years old, my favorite movie that year was Capricorn 1, where we faked the Mars landings and then we had to murder the astronauts. And that was the feel. And for a lot of things, that's the feel again. And let me tell you what happened here, why everybody agrees that everything sucks. And it's because the left won. They did their long march to the institutions. The whole theory of leftism is that everything that exists sucks, and we have to take everything over and change it to be leftist. And anything we can't take control of, the left, their theory is if they can't take control of it, they will destroy it, and if they can't destroy it, they will smear it until nobody trusts it. So we've seen that process play out. And this is why conservatives have come to mistrust everything. And the last institution standing was the military. We had such high trust in them, and then we saw what first what Obama did to our flag officer corps, and then we saw what Biden has done with putting all the woke and DEI stuff into the military. And so that was the last thing. Now we can't even trust that. The great irony, though, Scott, and this is the beauty of it. This is where nobody, not even the progressive left, not even the commies, can escape reality. Having either taken control of or corrupted or smeared or sullied or whatever our institutions, the left finds that still they don't trust them because, well, the left broke them.
I wonder, Bill Whittle, if it's part of it is, people who work at the sausage factory may be less likely to eat sausage because they know how it's made. I wonder if some of what Steve's talking about is basically the left is losing faith in institutions which they have been an integral part of because they know what it's like behind the veil. This is Kristen Saltis Anderson says this, and I quote, "We are in a low trust moment, and it binds right and left together." Bill, while this may be kind of a weird high point for our society in that people are coming together, it also seems to be a fragile basis upon which to establish a union. What do you think?
Well, I think I might have mentioned this at the end of the last Top Mike show. I did. I think that the information age has finally caught up to the government and to institutions. We've been in an information age economy for, let's just say, 30 years since the internet became popular with AOL in '95, somewhere around in there. So for 30 years, we've been an information age economy, and one of the many qualities about the information age is decentralization. Just our show is a great example. We don't belong to a network. In fact, it's actually kind of interesting to see how it evolved, because this show evolved out of what was at one time a network, PJTV, which took a large dollar investment to get started and got us all launched. And now we're off on our own with our own little business company and stuff. But the Joe Rogan podcast, of course, being the great hot example from the last election, where it's basically a guy in a studio with a couple, people working the soundboard, but there's not he's not in $100 million worth of infrastructure there to get him on the air. All of the aspects of the information age have fully taken root into our society, except for government and large institutions. Centralized government is a product of the industrial era. Our government, this is why I think it's so hopeful. The Constitution was designed for an agrarian, dispersed, decentralized people. We were an agrarian people when the Constitution was written. All of the reforms and all of the things that did such damage to the theory of this country occurred in the early 1900s when the industrial era was at its peak. All of those progressive constitutional amendments were the result of urbanization and centralization. And we still carry with us a heavily centralized, extraordinarily sluggish and fossilized government, and we still are seeing the last remnants of centralized things like centralized media, like a television network or a large newspaper like the New York Times. They're dinosaurs. They're done. They're on their way out. And what's happening is that these formerly centralized structures divided the country up into Republicans and Democrats, and those were your two choices, in the same way that growing up in the 60s and 70s, you had three choices for your news. You could watch it from CBS, ABC, or NBC at 6 o'clock, and if you wanted to drive a car, you had a Ford or Chrysler, or you had a Chevy, and that's it. Now that everything is broken up into individual bits and bytes of data, people can now make their own coalitions. We're no longer bound by the coalitions that had been enforced upon us by these centralized governmental things. You are either a Democrat or a Republican. Now people are much more in buffet mode. It's like, well, I kind of feel like I'm a Democrat on this issue and this issue and this issue, but I tend to lean Republican on another one. So as the control of information and the control of political influence decentralizes, you get people doing much more kind of concierge political opinions. I'll take one of those. I don't like those. I know these are supposed to be mine, but I'm not taking any of these. And as Steve pointed out, if the leftist position was to destroy American institutions and then inhabit them, well, that's exactly what they did. They didn't get to number one, destroy the institutions. Number two, take them over. Number three is the part that they forgot, which is restore confidence in those institutions. They just didn't think that went through that far. So yes, they've destroyed so many cultural institutions in order to take them over. And once they took them over, they were not able to restore the trust that had been in them before. So we're seeing enormous societal changes because of the information age that this has only happened 3 times. We had agricultural revolution, industrial revolution, information revolution. And we are in a period of transition that has been going on for 40 or 50 years and is rapidly coming to a close as we enter a new age where things just align differently. And much, much more, our political opinions have much higher resolution. Like I said, we're able to much more clearly differentiate between the things that I personally am a party of one now. It's not like I'm a Republican and I go right down the table. Now I get to pick and choose which issues I want to stand with. And with confidence in institutions being so low, it's small wonder that people are uniting around the idea that we don't trust any of you bastards.
Yeah.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, distrust is a really fragile foundation for a lasting union. And if we are going to aspire to a more perfect union, we're going to have to find something other than that. Bill nailed part of that, which is, we actually can't just tear down institutions. We have to build institutions of trust. While you were talking, I think it occurred to me that sociology is killing us. This idea that people can be grouped into masses and clusters and addressed as such has never felt comfortable. It always felt manipulative. And over time, young people coming up, in most generations, the next generation is less trusting of the institutions that were part of their parents' lives. But the more, especially young people today, are used to receiving communication in ways that are intensely personal and that feel really authentic and not grouped. It's like when an artist comes out on a stage and says, "Hello, Cleveland." Well, Cleveland didn't come to the concert. I came to the concert. And there are some artists who know how to talk to an audience in a way that makes each person in the audience feel like you're addressing them. That's what you get on TikTok, YouTube, and all the other social media channels, is you get people, the good ones, who feel like they're actually communicating with you. They're not speaking to some mass group. There's a phenomenon in marketing that if you talk about a problem that a person is experiencing, they think you have a solution. And so the corollary to that is if you throw rocks at their enemies, they think you're an ally. And so that's what's happening, I think, in many ways in politics and in public discourse, is people are hearing voices that are pinpointing problems. And when they hear those voices, they say those people must have a solution, because they have accurately diagnosed the problem. They've accurately described what I think is wrong here. Now, the real challenge comes in delivering the product, because you can sell an inauthentic, bad product to people once. Once they try it and it doesn't turn out to be what you indicated it might be, then you can't get them back. And so, Bill is absolutely right. It's reestablishing those institutions. It's the business leaders and CEOs who are willing to speak the truth and not treat everything like a public relations problem in the sense that we need a program to manipulate this. It's the guy who I heard about recently who saw a video from a reviewer on YouTube and got in the comments section. The CEO of the company got in the comments section and said, "Hey, that critique that you just made of my company, you're right. And here's what we're going to do to change that." And then he listed specific things that he was already instituting to address the problem that product reviewer had described. It's those kinds of people. It's people in politics who are willing to stand up and say, not just, I'm up there in Washington, D.C. fighting for the things that you believe in, but to be honest about it and say, look, I'm part of a 435-person group of people who somehow has to come together with at least, 220 of us to come up with a solution to anything. Here's how I operate. This is what I do to try to communicate with my colleagues. I mean, if somebody were to pull back the veil on Congress, on the House or the Senate or the presidency and be honest with people, I think you'd have a lot more trust in institutions. And so it sounds trite, but maybe try a little authenticity. Maybe try some honesty. Maybe acknowledge that you make mistakes. Maybe instead of just saying, I speak the truth, how about do what you say you're going to do? And those are the kind of actions that spur true trust in the long run. I'm concerned that this coming together right now among Republicans and Democrats in dissatisfaction is going to crumble as soon as both groups of people realize that nobody really has a solution, that they just know how to criticize. But there is a market window here. There is an opportunity for people who do have solutions, for people who are willing to work together with others, and for people who can actually start to deliver on some of the things that they talk about. Not just saying, don't trust him, but saying, here's how I think that we can address that. I'm going to need your help. Can you give me a hand on this? For Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making Right Angle possible.